Welcome, Andreas. It's wonderful to have you on the show today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I was looking through your profile and looking at the fact that you're a CEO, you co-founded Beetroot, and this is a tech company we're speaking a bit about off air. And I was curious to hear, what have you found to be some of the greatest challenges in terms of just leadership? So in terms of managing a team, managing a company, what have been the greatest hurdles and challenges?
Okay, yeah, the greatest challenges in 11 years. Yeah, no, but I think sort of a mixed bag. The last year has been last 1.5 years has been very special in terms of circumstances, because we have a lot of people, like most of our people are in Ukraine, so it's kind of a war context. So that's sort of the first thing.
Very specific, yes.
Yeah, it's very specific, and it comes to mind. If you were asked me before, I would probably answer it a bit different, but
yeah, so that's a good point. Before, what would you have said would have been your greatest challenges?
So we have tried to structure our company in as sort of flat and decentralized way as possible. I found that amazing in many ways, like the opportunity to give people trust, initiative, to get the best out of people, and hiring the best people available, and simply trusting them, shocking them with trust. That's been sort of our approach from start. In general, that's great. However, I think one of the challenges we've had while growing, so by becoming sort of 500 people, that at some point is sort of very decentralized, with technically anyone could almost take any decision. So sort of the sort of quite extreme way of doing self-management. At some point, it almost became a blocker, because since the company becomes more and more complex, even I, as a CEO and founder, I could find it difficult to take a decision, because you have a lot of different aspects to take into account and sync and so on. So in a way, I think one of my biggest leadership challenges there is to find a structure that helps to support decision making while not making it classical pyramid.
I hear this a lot with horizontal type hierarchy. It's very interesting to compare both. Obviously, there's some downsides to having the pyramid type. In many ways, trust and proactivity is slowed down, and also decisions also take a long time, because you have to go up the ranks and ask and ask and ask. So it's not like decision making is made easy. So I'm curious, did you feel then helped in terms of decision making in this still sort of more horizontal hierarchy?
Yeah, so we've been experimenting a lot back and forth over the years. I think now we are, and if you take a full scale from extremely hierarchical to the extreme way of self-management, we are definitely closer to the self-management side. However, I think one of the important steps we've done is to divide the organization into sort of sizable units of up to around 50 people. That's around the size we find where you can sort of get everyone in such a team involved in feeling the ownership for that unit, without making it overly complex and create sort of too much internal hierarchies and such. But then, so giving those units certain frameworks, certain support, so certain sort of centralized things, and then have a sort of small coordinating team, company center-wise, which is not necessarily sort of taking a lot of decisions, but it's sort of a place to coordinate decisions. So anyone in the company should have a way to, without going through 5 layers of hierarchy, impact the decision making on a central level, or sort of on a company level. So high level of self-management responsibility within units, but sort of giving a framework for that. Yeah.
I like this idea of units, and I think that helps a lot. And as you said, if we can simplify things so it doesn't have to go through so many layers, that's always interesting. I'm also curious, I was wondering right now how you deal with decision making full stop, because I know, as also CEO of my own company, I don't have a team of, I don't know how many thousands that you have, or hundreds, but I still feel that in general for CEOs and entrepreneurs, there's a lot of decisions to be made all day long, and that can take a lot of energy. So I'm curious, personally, as a leader, as a CEO, as a co-founder, how do you manage decision making so that it doesn't maybe have so much weight or so much energy maybe consuming?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, sometimes in the end of the day, you don't know what you're going to have for dinner because you think you're done with decisions for for the day. But I think I'm in general, I'm as a leader, I guess, and as a person, I'm not super detail oriented. So what I would typically do is to try to find very smart people who are. I usually say that if you ask any question about Beetroot, you'll always hopefully always find a person in the company who knows the answer better than me, meaning that when a decision should be taken, of course I'm involved and sort of but usually I feel that my role is more like pointing out or being involved in pointing out the direction. However, sort of nailing the decision or sort of is usually not actually on my table.
Yes, and I think that's a good way of putting it. And again, it shows great leadership that you're not the one taking all the decisions, right? Because then it's a dictatorship. So the fact that you're providing the direction and other people can make decisions at different levels shows, great trust, psychological safety, and also as a leader, the direction. So nice to hear that, you could still make decisions clearly and decide what to have for food. I do remember this one time where I think it was a Saturday morning and my husband asked me something and I literally just said, I can't have a single more decision. It's just like, I can't decide if we go for a walk or to the supermarket. It's too much. And so it hasn't happened often, but I remember this one time because I thought, wow, what's happened? So I think we can reach a stage where we just processing so much constantly that we don't have enough space for even the simplest decisions.
I wonder if there is a magic number for that, like sort of when you sort of spent your amount of decisions of the day. You should make
it's probably not in numbers, it's probably in cognitive load.
Yeah,
I think
probably.
because it might not just be decisions. It might be decisions plus focus work plus pressure plus deadlines, but that all accumulated that create this feeling. And I thought it must be terrible for people who go through burnout, because they must feel like that chronically and until they actually fully burn out and then can't work and then go back. But I think I've experienced what it would be like on a micro scale and caught it and taken time at a weekend and an evening. And I think what often happens is it goes very fast and people don't realize what's going on and then they just continue working and crash. Anyway, I've spoken with a lot of people about this. And yes, I want to come back to this idea that people can make decisions in the company, which I think is great. And I feel it's highly related to psychological safety. And so this idea that people trust themselves, trust others, feel that they have the power, that they can make decisions, that they can make mistakes and it's okay. How did you enable this? Obviously not on your own, but still as a co-founder and CEO, that it's still a lot linked to you, not just you, but a lot. How did you enable this psychological safety within your company?
Well, I think there are many different ingredients in that soup, but a few things I could say. I mean, first of all, like starting from going back to the beginning. I mean, like every company, we started with sort of 2 persons, and then we grow gradually and so on. And of course, a lot of that foundation was built on building a very close relationship to the early people in the team. So sort of building a culture that then has been spreading throughout the company as we grow to much bigger size, where I mean, I don't know everyone personally in the company. However, I still have a feeling when I meet people from who I actually don't really know, but from a company, I have a feeling that we managed to sort of build that we have this core culture that exists. It's, of course, it's not always perfect and so on, but some core ingredients, like, so we have this very informal way of relating to each other, and part of this, even though these days it's like hybrid offices and so on, but even part of it is like sort of the office you come into. So one thing we've had from very start, actually in the beginning it was more like we felt comfortable with that, but it became this thing that in all of our offices we wear slippers. So you come in and you sort of put on your slippers, and it's like, so you're coming home. Like, so we call it like your home of great team. And So this very like informal wholeness idea, I guess. And another thing is, of course, the trust, and it's a word that is easy to use, but in practice, like when, and this has happened a number of times, like when a team member have joined Beetroot and sort of after 1 month they come and say, kind of, I've never felt so trusted in before. That's it can actually be it can be stressful in the beginning, especially if you come from an environment where you used to be sort of told every day what you're supposed to do, and then you come into Beetroot and you're like, here's your role, here's your support system, but it's like it's up to you how to handle it. And so that's something we've learned in the recruitment process, also to sort of be upfront with, this is how we normally work in Beetroot and how and so on. But a lot of individuals tend to sort of rise up to that opportunities to sort of like, finally I can have some space and so on. So we like to say that we want to shock people with trust. Another thing, I guess, I mean, transparency is important, and also, I mean, transparency with that, I mean, not everything is perfect, or like, I mean, it's sort of like making things human in a way. So we try to be very open. I mean, for example, finances, or like, yeah, we I don't know if we are always great in making the communication flow go the whole way around, but at least, I mean, I think that most of our team members feel that if they have a question, even like a sensitive question or whatever, like that they can basically write me if they want on Slack, and there is no sort of big secrets in the company. I don't know if that's in particular gives the feeling of safety, but I think it's connected. Yeah. Well, there was a few examples, but probably more.
Probably more, but I think what you said about trust and creating this informal environment and the slippers, and also this idea that people can come with any questions. There's a lot of companies, I think, that like the idea of maybe being seen as transparent, or maybe say it, but in practice, companies that really practice this, they're not that many, simply because transparency also comes with the risk. Comes with the risk that when people see the, maybe salaries or different things, there's comparison, there's questions. So I think sometimes companies feel some things need to stay in the leadership team, and I mean, obviously up to a certain extent, a few information, but it's a tricky balance of knowing how much do you withhold because you might not want to overwhelm them or scare them or intimidate them with different info, so you keep a bit, and then how much do you share because you also want them to know that it's open and transparent, and also that you're willing to give them the information.
Yeah, it's interesting because of course it's relatively easy to be transparent with everything that is going well. It's harder to be transparent when it's like, okay, we're losing money this month, like, or like but I also think maybe that's what's connected to the safety space, that when you are transparent also with the challenges, it creates the common trust. But then, I mean, I think you mentioned a good part about also information overflow, because that was a little bit when before we had the unit structure with like hundreds of people, like anyone can decide anything, but nobody is really capable of deciding anything, because it's just like this huge flow of information and things to take into consideration, and it actually was supposed to be a way to be quick and agile, to take decisions close to the actions and so on, becomes this sort of complex monster. So on the one hand, transparency is great, but of course, if everybody spends their energy every day of knowing everything that is going on, you will soon have a company who is just reading information and having meetings about meetings and stuff like that. So that's actually something, I'm saying it like an extreme version, but it's something that we worked on to be transparent, but not also not over flood everyone with information all the time, basically. So sort of closer groups, yeah, and so on.
Yes, interesting. And you mentioned right now this term of agility. So how have you enabled, aside from these group of maybe 50 people, how have you enabled your company to be more agile and therefore also more high performing? Because we know that agility, flexibility can lead to this high performing environment. So what have you put in place to enable this agility?
Yeah, good question. I'm afraid I will come back to the core components of like trust, size of the team, but also, I mean, I think that's maybe not so agility connected, but it's a way to sort of keep the focus still that we have. I mean, we see ourselves as an impact company. Yes, we are commercial, but we've always said, and it's always been the truth of the company, is that we are a commercial company in the sense that we use the commercial tools to achieve an impact, or many different ways of impact, and that's using that as sort of guiding force is helpful to keep the focus. It also attracts people attracted by that vision, which also tend to be people who like to take initiatives. It's a little bit like a self fulfilling thing. I wish I would tell you something more about interesting tools or approaches. It's a little bit empty.
If it all comes down to trust, it's a pretty good thing. If people listening think they want to build a more agile company and it comes down to having a strong impact of building trust within the company, I mean, these things are very big. They sound just like one word, but actually to really do that from the ground up and to really build a company that has a lot of trust and transparency is a lot of hard work. It's not, maybe if it comes quite naturally to you and you did it organically, it doesn't feel that way. But if a company lacks trust or lacks transparency, to reverse that, it's not that simple.
Tricky, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I really think it's sort of, I mean, of course, there is a lot of layers of details into sort of how things actually happen. And to be fair, I mean, in an organization that is a little bit more like an organism, it can differ quite much between different teams. And in some constellation, there might be a lot of agility and things happening. In some place or organization, it might be that things are a bit stuck. Like, and then it's sort of a balance between involving and seeing if, sort of, do we need to sort of inject something in this group or in this context to get that initiative, or it's like it's your playground, and that I can find it quite tricky sometimes to find the balance there, basically.
It is a tricky balance. And how many employees did you say that were working for Beetroot?
So we're around 500 people, divided into around like 12 units or so, and it's almost like some of the units are almost like they're all like its own company in the company, and some of the units are a little bit more interconnected. So it's not like super exact, but there are some common frameworks. I mean, you would sort of have finances on the unit level, you would have sort of unit strategies, and then you have sort of company strategy, and they should be somewhat connected, or at least not disconnected, preferably.
Yes.
Because that's also, again, I mean, in the extreme version, it's like almost you can have the situation where a unit takes a route that sort of almost forgets about the common goal. So again, that's also a balance. But I think this. I mean, a lot of these things it's not like, I see it more like an art than as a sort of. Of course, there needs to be structure, there needs to be things in place, and so on. But in the end of the day, it's like people delivering things together. That's it.
Yeah, as long as they're delivering, that's the main thing. I was also thinking, as you were sharing this, the 500 people are thinking, how do you get the overview of everything? Is it that you have one core person or two core people in each pod that sort of gives you the update of everything that's going on in there?
Yes. And sometimes, I mean, again, the good thing is that I usually tend to keep on the high level. So I usually don't know what's going on in detail. And that's, I mean, I think that's usually that's a good thing. If it's like if everything is fine, there is no need for me as CEO and founder to know the details. But then, of course, I mean, we want to, all the good things that are going on in the company in different units, of course, we want to spread it among ourselves externally and so on. So I guess, yeah, in a way, I mean, a lot of my work is also related to just talking to people, keeping a little bit like yeah, a little bit of a finger of the pulse, of course, like, and also I tend to have this role of, again, I'm not super deep in the operations in almost any of the parts of the company, but I tend to be a little bit of a spider and sort of connecting dots, and just like you want to go this way, and but we already did this 2 years ago over here, maybe you should talk to that person. So it's a bit like an organism thing. But then, of course, I mean, we have like big team calls where everybody get the chance to update on their progress and so on, and nothing super revolutionary, but yes, the communication flow, Slack updates, keeping. I mean, we try to keep it a little bit like quarterly with OKRs and things like that to sort of be able to keep track of things and find the synergies. We talk a lot about synergies because, again, when it can be one of the downsides of when you're dividing the company in different units, that you, at some point when a unit becomes so focused on their unit, you can at some point start to forget about synergies or reinventing the wheel 3 times. So there are pros and cons, but I think that we found a relatively like good balance between the more chaotic way of self-managing and the sort of strict classical hierarchy of things, because that's, I mean, personally, I wouldn't like to work in such an organization either. Doesn't seem fun, neither on the bottom or on the top of such a pyramid. It seems like a bit like a bureaucratic nightmare in many cases to me.
Yes, and I like what you're sharing in general with the communication, but also the keeping the vision and the overview and connecting, the spider web, networking. It sounds to me like you've got a really nice balance of still knowing what's going on in the company and it not being totally doing it on its own, which could also work, but still having the update, having the communication, having the group calls, etc., but not being so involved in it that it's like you're in the trenches versus you're actually seeing it from above. Because I think it's important as a leader that if we step in too much into the details and the everyday work, then it's harder to have that vision. This is something that me as an entrepreneur, I'm constantly going back and forth in the business, out of the business, in the business, out of the business. So sometimes I spend weeks in the business just doing the work, and then I remember, wait a minute, where am I going? Is this right? Let's step out of the business and look, because I need to do both. But when you have a whole team, when you have so many people doing all the work, sure, you step in to check if it's aligned with the vision and to see if it's coherent and see how everything is moving. But it also sounds to me like you've got more space to step out of the business, see the vision, network, connect, impact, which is quite nice. I actually think that's what leaders should be doing more of, and less invading or overstepping on people's toes to check people are doing good work, because people do great work when they feel they have that autonomy. So
yeah, exactly. And I just realized that, I mean, of course, it's the other risk is, of course, if you're like always on the zoomed out level, that you don't really understand reality of business. And I think it's actually interesting because recently, for the last couple of months, I've been more involved in, say, since I'm now basically more in Sweden and our clients is more in Sweden, and I haven't been involved really much in sales for the last like 7 years or so, and now I'm suddenly out talking more to clients, and I actually like that, because it's a bit like getting back to basics, like actually talking to the clients and so on. So but of course, like if I would be busy controlling every part of the business, I wouldn't be able to do that, but I do like sort of being there with a shovel here and there, and of course I guess you kind of put a bit of I mean, some in a way, of course, like all the culture of a company is often, it has some kind of foundation in probably in the founders' values and stuff like that, and as a founder, of course, if something happens in the business and you see that this is not aligned with those values that we built and so on, of course, then suddenly you can be a bit triggered or like be quite hands-on. But I guess the key is not to sort of overuse that superpower, like not be this sort of telling everyone what to do, but more, I mean, you can be in a specific situation, you can be quite, like, say, hands-on and involved and so on, and then you walk out, but you shouldn't do it too often yeah.
That's exactly what I think. And it's I was rereading again for multiple times the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Have you read it by Stephen Covey? And he speaks about that at the beginning. He says he gives the example as a parent with his child, but he says, I could just intervene and say, you know, this isn't the right thing to do, or do it this way, or did that. Of course one can, right? Especially the parents, you have authority, but even as a leader of the company. But it must be used with extreme caution, because of course if you use it too often, then people's motivation decreases. It's the whole PPC balance, or the whole goose and the golden egg story. It's if we don't nurture that relationship and we only focus on the product, then suddenly we're destroying the capacity to build it. So it sounds to me like you've done that very little, which means that your units are working, which means you don't need to do it too often.
Yeah, and it's also, yes, it's super important, especially when, I mean, if you want to grow a company, especially want to grow it fast. I mean, the sum of the success of a company is pretty much the sum of all the decisions made and the activities performed in the company. So of course, if you become the bottleneck because everybody tends to go to you when a decision needs to be made because they know that you will have a slightly different opinion or want to have the final word and so on and so forth, then you basically reach this limit of how fast the company can grow because you cannot take enough decision as an organization. So if I truly believe, like, I mean, again, the success of the companies is based on the sum and the quality of the decisions made, but rather having, you know, 100 decisions that are 90% than 10 decisions that are 100%, especially in today's world when things are moving really quick and so on. But the other part of it, I said 90%, but actually I think in many cases, in most cases, the decisions made closer to reality are actually better. And I've seen that so many times in different organizations when the manager have this urge to be the manager and just coming in and sort of disrupting the work, taking a decision that doesn't fully without fully understanding the details of the situation, demotivating everyone and stepping out and leaving sort of a I mean, it happens all the time, right? And it's easy to understand why as well, but yeah, and the art.
Yes, exactly what we don't want to do, keeping but yes, it's also easy to understand why they do it. They're also under the pressure, and they want it to be done the right way, and they feel that that's the way to do it. And then generally, especially if it's a pyramid, they've got pressure from the people above doing the same thing to them, etc.,
Exactly.
etc. But that is,
make sure that this is done right, and
yes,
you're like,
make it all time.
yeah.
The right way.
Yeah,
It's so interesting. It's so interesting how there's so many different ways to lead, but it also comes down to personal values and to your way of seeing things to begin with.
I have a very extreme example of how sort of symbolizing the difference in so when the full-scale war started, and we basically had almost all of our team members in a war zone suddenly. There were, I mean, of course it was super chaotic and a lot of decisions that needed to be made on all kinds of level, on company level, on local level, and so on and so forth. And that would be, I mean, taking all of those decisions sort of top down will be like physically completely impossible. So what we did in the beginning, like the first morning, was basically we said like sort of, okay, all the company resources, like money basically, is available without any like approval process if it's related to anyone's safety. And that didn't mean that we in the end spent huge amount of money as a company. We did spend some money, but it meant that everyone was like completely unlocked in, okay, if I think that this decision needs to be taken, this I don't know, evacuation bus or whatever, I just take it. I don't look for Andreas, or I don't look for any approval. It's like the instruction is do what needs to be done. and I think, I mean, it's just it's an extreme example, but I think it can symbolize like where, I mean, in any kind of crisis situation where it's a complex, like involving a lot of people and so on. On the one hand, it can be important to point out some things like company-wide and so on. But in the end of the day, those sort of small or even like big decisions that needs to be done here and now, you don't have time basically for I mean, it's like a sports team as well, right? You don't run around and the coach doesn't decide where the ball should go in the football field, right? It's a lot of decisions happening all the time. So
true, provide the overview, provide the clear guidelines, and then people do with that and make their own decisions. Amazing. Well, this has just gone by super quickly. So many questions around leadership. It was so interesting to hear your perspective. So interesting to hear how you view things, and also this idea of the different pods, and also the trust and the psychological safety and different leadership models. So thank you so much, Andreas. Where can people find you if they want to be in touch, or if they want to know more about Beetroot?
You can find beetroot.co or beetrootacademy.com. Or if you want to get in contact with me, find me on LinkedIn by my name, write a short note, listen to the podcast or whatever. We'll be happy to connect.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.